I've always considered myself a lucky Omega, born into an open-minded, middle-class family. I was pampered from the start, spoiled enough to get the stars if I asked for them, though I might settle for the moon if I was feeling generous. Armed with a pretty face, I wielded beauty like a weapon. Sure, I had a bad temper, but honestly, who cared? I was gorgeous. Then, in university, I met the alpha I had a secret crush on, a senior 2 years above me, the campus golden boy, Lucas Vaughn. I thought this would finally be my first real challenge in life, a taste of love's bittersweet sting. But instead, Lucas Vaughn confessed to me. He told me it was love at first sight, that from the moment he saw me, he knew it had to be me. And so, we fell into a smooth, easy romance. After I graduated, we naturally stepped into marriage. By then, he was already successful, running his own finance company. I had the grand wedding every Omega dreamed of, and a picture-perfect family that made others envious. Then, I had a dream. In it, everything was still going my way, until Lucas Vaughn hired a beta assistant. That was when things started to change. The beta's name was Miles Bennett. In public, Lucas called him Secretary Miles. In private, he called him Little Miles. They began meeting in secret at the office. Over time, they got bolder. Bold enough to carry on their affair in the home I shared with Lucas. And me, Evan Clark? I was nothing more than the pretty but painfully stupid cannon fodder spouse. When I found out about Miles, I exploded, screaming, crying, making a complete fool of myself. The dream ended with Lucas forcing me out of the house with nothing, signing the divorce papers and abandoning me on the street. When I woke up, I couldn't breathe. It felt too real. So real that my emotions spiraled, and tears streamed down my face before I could stop them. I turned and saw Lucas's handsome profile in sleep. His hand was reaching across the bed, searching for me. I was furious. Without hesitation, I smacked him hard across the face. I didn't hold back. A red handprint bloomed on his cheek immediately. Lucas stirred awake, blinking at my teary, resentful face. He froze for 2 seconds. Then he swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing as his brain quickly processed the situation. He sat up halfway, his solid chest and firm 8-pack abs on display. Taking my right hand in his, he gently kneaded my palm. "What's wrong, wife? Did hitting me hurt your hand? Next time, don't use your hand, I'll find you a tool." I pressed my lips together, refusing to answer, still looking angry and wronged. So he pulled me into his arms, letting me touch his chest one moment and his abs the next. When I still didn't cheer up, he started imitating a puppy to make me laugh. In the end, well, let's just say the quarrel ended with making up in bed. Afterward, I drifted back to sleep, and Lucas went off to work, dutifully paying the tax before he left. As a professional spoiled spouse, I had to admit I may have overreacted. I mean, seriously, how could I smack Lucas Vaughn over a dream? A dream with zero proof, even if it was strangely satisfying. Still, a tiny sliver of guilt lingered. So today I decided to do something productive, and maybe even educational. I was going to my baking class where I could mingle with other Omegas and get some advice. Specifically, when you mess up, how do you make it up to your alpha? By the time I walked into the classroom, I had tied on my cute yellow apron with a teddy bear design. The soft scent of vanilla was already drifting in the air. That's when I heard it. Quiet sobbing from somewhere nearby. 2 Omegas stood together at one of the counters. One was crying into a tissue, shoulders trembling. The other was gently rubbing his back, murmuring comfort. I knew them both. The crying one was Joe. The one offering tissues and soft words was Owen. I glanced their way a couple of times before stepping closer. "What happened?" I asked. Owen hesitated, lips parting but no words coming out. Joe, however, sniffled hard and blurted it out. "My husband cheated on me." I froze. I knew Joe's husband, not personally, but I'd seen him before. Solid, dependable alpha. The kind who always looked like he'd walk your grandmother across the street. "Wait," I said, frowning. "Aren't you two a 90% match? Did another Omega with a higher compatibility score show up?" Joe shook his head, tears clinging to his lashes. "It's not an Omega, it's a beta. Betas don't have pheromones, so I never noticed." I had no idea. Until now. We've only been married for 3 months. I was at a loss for words. A beta? Really? In the ranking of potential romantic threats, betas usually sat somewhere between unlikely and background character. Yet here Joe was, sobbing into a tissue while his 90% match was apparently off, making coffee dates with a pheromone-less third party. The scent of freshly baked butter cookies was warm and sweet, curling around me like a soft blanket. While they were still warm, I called the driver and told him to take me straight to Lucas Vaughn's company. On the ride over, I glanced around the car, then turned to the chief secretary who was escorting me upstairs. "Mr. Zhang, is the CEO's office hiring anyone new lately?" I asked casually. Mr. Zhang, a middle-aged beta, gave me a probing look. "I believe there's still an opening for a special assistant?" I shook my head. He'd completely misunderstood what I meant. The elevator chimed, and as soon as the doors opened, Mr. Zhang led me to the CEO's office before politely excusing himself. Lucas looked up, and the second he saw me, his eyes lit up in surprise. The cold, aloof CEO mask vanished instantly. He crossed the room like an eager golden retriever and swept me into his arms. "Wife, what are you doing here?" I lifted the small box in my hands. "Fresh from the oven. Thought I'd bring you some." Lucas grinned, his joy unrestrained. Without a second thought, he pulled me closer and pressed me against his desk, kissing me like he'd forgotten all about the existence of office walls. One kiss turned into another, and another. 2 hours later, I was leaning back against his chair, slightly sore from where the desk had dug into my back. Honestly, if I hadn't complained, I think he would have happily gone another 2 hours. Satisfied at last, Lucas held me close, his fingers absently playing with my hair, but my mind was still haunted by the dream. "Lucas, do you have anyone in your department with the last name Bennett?" He frowned. "No one by that name. Why? Did someone upset you? I'll dock their bonus." I let out a small breath of relief. "No, just asking." Still, he added, "We are hiring soon, but don't worry, wife, I only hire betas, no omegas." A muscle in my brow twitched. I hesitated for a long moment before deciding not to mention Miles Bennett by name. What if saying it out loud made him curious? So I made an excuse about the office feeling stuffy and slipped out for a walk. Naturally, my walk led me straight to the front desk. "Hi," I said to the receptionist, my tone light but my heartbeat quick. "Has anyone named Miles Bennett been here for an interview?" To my utter disbelief, fate decided to side with me today. The receptionist nodded. "Yes, someone named Miles Bennett came in earlier. Just finished filling out the application and left." I smiled sweetly. "Could I see that form?" Not only did I get the form, I also had the receptionist quietly delete the record of his visit from the system. "Sorry, Miles Bennett," I murmured under my breath, tucking the paper into my bag. "You may have lost a high-paying job, but I just saved my marriage." In the weeks that followed, I found myself making a few more casual trips to Lucas Vaughn's company, and every time I'd subtly, sometimes not so subtly, probe for updates. "Any new hires in the CEO's office yet? Did that assistant position get filled?" After several rounds of Mr. Zhang, the chief secretary, giving me the "I know you're up to something" look but saying nothing, he finally broke. "We did hire someone," he confessed. My pulse spiked. "Who?" "A beta, last name Yan." Relief washed through me, but I wasn't going to leave it at that. I made it a point to go see this new secretary Yan for myself. Well, see might be too strong a word. What I actually did was stand behind a pane of glass on a different floor and sneak a peek from a distance. Secretary Yan was seated among a cluster of employees, dressed in a plain, ill-fitting suit that screamed insurance salesman. He was turned slightly away from me, so I couldn't get a clear look at his face. Still, from his posture and the way he carried himself, straight-backed, polite, almost painfully proper, he looked like the kind of person who would apologize for breathing too loudly. Safe. Completely safe. That night, Lucas came home late from working overtime and grumbled about the new secretary. Doesn't think fast enough. Keeps making mistakes. Each time he complained, I'd defend Secretary Yan. Give him some time. New people always take a while to adjust. He seems dependable to me. Sure, he's a little slow, but slow can be good. Means he's honest. A month later, Lucas finally stopped mentioning him at all, which in my book meant my marriage had weathered yet another potential storm. Even if the storm was a mild-mannered beta in a bad suit. It had been weeks since I last saw Joe. When he finally walked into class again, I barely recognized him. He looked thinner, worn down, his expression heavy with a quiet sadness that seemed to cling to him like a shadow. I'd missed several classes myself, too busy dealing with my own looming crisis. So I had no idea what had happened in the meantime. Quietly, I asked Owen about it. He sighed. Joe and his husband had a huge fight over the affair, but his husband's in love with that beta now. Won't come back. He's even forcing Joe to sign the divorce papers. A chill ran down my spine. It was too similar, far too similar to the story from my dream. From that day, I kept a closer eye on Joe. Day by day, he grew quieter, more withdrawn, until his presence in the room felt like a dimming light. And somewhere inside me, a faint panic began to take root. A fear I might be watching my dream come true in real life. Owen stayed close to him, always offering words of comfort. Me? My life had been almost unnervingly smooth. I didn't really know the right things to say in situations like this. So instead, I just stayed nearby and brought them snacks. Warm cookies, soft pastries, whatever we'd made in class that day. Our baking class, after all, was less about serious training and more about wealthy omegas passing the time. Most people barely paid attention to the recipes. I was one of the rare ones who actually had a knack for it, and my classmates were always happy to sample my homework. I'd begun to think Joe would simply fade further into that quiet melancholy, but then one day, he showed up with a smile. It wasn't a big smile, but it was enough to make me do a double take. His whole demeanor seemed lighter, almost relieved. It was the kind of smile that made you wonder whether the light had truly returned, or if it was just the last flare before going out. Across the table, Owen and I exchanged a look, both quietly suspicious. We spent the entire class watching Joe as discreetly as we could. Just before the end of the lesson, he suddenly called out to me. "Evan, I really envy you." Before I could ask what he meant, he slipped a business card into my hand. He told me he'd divorced his husband, and then, almost casually, he added that he'd bought a little shop in town. He was going to open his own dessert cafe, and if I ever had the chance, I should stop by. I tucked the card into my apron pocket without really looking at it. The smile on his face didn't seem forced. Maybe he really had moved on. I smiled faintly and said, "Yeah, I'll definitely come by," even though, deep down, I wasn't sure if I believed either of us. Lucas Vaughn and I had decided it was time to have a baby. It had been more than half a year since my last dream. The name Miles Bennett had all but faded from my mind, slipping away like a faint echo. Life was still good. In fact, maybe a little too good. And now that Lucas had the perfect excuse, for the sake of the baby, he'd become even more shameless in bed. Not that he'd ever been gentle before, but these days, he was relentless. Sometimes he'd come home forgetting his keys, making me open the door for him. And the moment I did, he'd be there, tugging off his tie while kissing me breathless, sweeping me up onto the entryway table. Other times, he'd catch me halfway through making desserts, or lounging on the sofa with my phone, or hanging laundry on the balcony. No place in the apartment was safe, and after he'd had his fun, he'd switch into big puppy mode, kneeling at my feet with a repentant look, letting me press my foot against his chest. "Wife, if you're mad, just hit me a few times," he'd say, eyes wide and pitiful. As if I'd fall for that. I wasn't about to punish him, only to have him enjoy it. Alpha stamina was no joke. By the time he was done, it was nearly dawn. He'd head off to work, and I'd finally collapse into bed. That morning, I hadn't been asleep for long when I heard a knock at the door. Still groggy, I rubbed my face and padded barefoot to answer it. A stranger stood there. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, his features striking and refined, his whole presence carrying an air I couldn't quite pin down. He blinked at me as if taken aback, then said cautiously, "Mrs. Vaughn?" Yes? And you are?" His expression softened into a polite smile. "I'm Mr. Vaughn's secretary. I came to retrieve a contract from his study. He said he tried calling you, but I suppose it didn't go through." I nodded slowly, my eyes never leaving him. In the CEO's office, there was only one secretary I'd never gotten a proper look at, Secretary Yan. I hadn't expected him to have changed so much in half a year. "Come in, I'll take you to the study." He pressed his lips together, as if debating whether to say something. "No need to change shoes," I added lightly. "Just come in." I turned to lead the way. As we walked down the hall, I had the distinct feeling of eyes on me, soft but constant. I glanced back, and sure enough, our gazes met. He looked away quickly, clearing his throat. "You and Mr. Vaughn seem very close." I reached back and touched the spot on my neck where Lucas had bitten me a little too hard last night. Heat crept into my cheeks. "Lucas? Yeah, in private, he's actually pretty clingy." Then, with a little smile, I added, "You look about my age. Just call me Evan. No need for the formalities, it feels strange." Something flickered in his eyes. It wasn't quite sadness, but there was a shadow there, carefully hidden. "You're having a baby?" he asked. I saw the toys on the sofa. Well, didn't know you were the gossiping type, Secretary Yan," I teased. "No baby yet, we're just trying." He said nothing after that. We didn't speak again until he'd retrieved the contract and I'd walked him to the door. There, he hesitated before saying, "Mrs. Vaughn, I know it's summer, but the floor can still be cold. You might catch a chill, especially since you're trying for a baby. If you do, well, that wouldn't be good." His voice grew softer as he spoke, and the tips of his ears flushed pink. I smiled to myself. For all his changes, at heart, Secretary Yan was still the same, earnest, proper, and just a little awkward. 2 pink lines. I stared at the pregnancy test in my hand. Twice I'd taken it, and twice the result was the same, bright red, undeniable. I was pregnant, and in just 3 days, it would be our first wedding anniversary. Perfect timing. I decided I'd keep it to myself until that night. I wanted to surprise Lucas Vaughn with the news, to see the look on his face when I told him he was going to be a father. But when the anniversary finally arrived, my phone rang that afternoon. "Sorry, babe," Lucas said, his voice low, almost apologetic. "I'm going to be a bit late tonight." "Work?" I asked casually. "Sort of. A last-minute dinner meeting. I swear I'll be home before 9. He paused, then added, "I promise." "Don't drink too much," I reminded him. He chuckled, swore up and down he wouldn't, lingered on the line for a few more affectionate words, and then reluctantly hung up. I'd given the housekeeper the night off so I could prepare everything myself, wine glasses, candles, his favorite dishes. 7 o'clock came. 8, 9. By 10 o'clock, my smile had worn thin. I called his phone. No answer. Again, still nothing. Unease prickled at my skin. I dialed Secretary Zhang instead. "Mrs. Vaughn," Zhang's voice came through, slightly flustered. "I can't reach Mr. Vaughn either," I frowned. "Weren't you supposed to be with him at this dinner?" "No, not me," Zhang said quickly. "I had a family matter tonight. It was Secretary Bennett who went with him." A cold ripple ran down my spine. "Secretary Bennett? Which Bennett?" "Miles Bennett, of course," Zhang said, as if it were obvious. "You've met him. He came to your house once to pick up documents for Mr. Vaughn." I froze. "Miles Bennett? That's impossible. The one who came here was Secretary Yan." There was a pause. "Mrs. Vaughn." "Secretary Yan was dismissed half a year ago. Miles has been handling all of Mr. Vaughn's affairs since then." For a moment, my mind went blank. My fingers trembled so hard I nearly dropped the phone. "You mean to tell me Miles has been working by Lucas's side for over 6 months?" A flash of white seemed to explode behind my eyes, my vision tilting for a moment. No wonder he'd seemed so curious about us. The casual questions, the subtle glances, the way he probed, as if looking for cracks. The memory from my dreams surged back like a wave I'd tried to forget. "The dinner tonight, is it with the executives from Huihai Corporation?" I remembered because, in Huihai's upper management, there was an alpha who had once been infatuated with Miles, and in my dream, that alpha had drugged Miles during a similar dinner. Lucas had rescued him, and they had spent the night together, unable to resist the heat between them. When Zhang confirmed it, my voice came out slow, heavy, almost foreign to my own ears. "I see. Don't bother trying to reach Lucas tonight," I added quietly. "I'm sure he has things to take care of." Pregnant. And my husband had just spent the night with someone else. What now? The only answer that made sense was simple. Take the baby and run. I dug through every drawer, every cabinet, pulling out all the cash I could find in the house. My mind was foggy, frantic. Then I remembered, almost by accident, the little card tucked inside the pocket of my kitchen apron. An address. Following it led me to a small town I'd never even heard of. Tucked away, quiet, the kind of place that didn't seem to belong to the same world as the glass towers and corporate meetings of Lucas's life. I wandered the narrow streets until I stopped in front of a charming dessert shop. The windows glowed warmly against the dusk. The moment I pushed open the door, a bell chimed softly above me. And there he was. Joe. His eyes widened in surprise, and then his whole face lit up. "I can't believe you actually came." I studied him quietly. He looked better than I'd expected, healthier, stronger. There was a steady warmth in his smile and a brightness in his eyes I hadn't seen before. I'd been nervous on the way here, telling myself that if he looked worse off than before, I'd just turn around and leave. But his sincerity drew me in. He ushered me to a table, brought me a plate of fresh, golden pastries, and poured a steaming cup of floral tea. Joe talked easily, telling me about his life since moving out on his own, how free it felt, how happy he'd been. The more he spoke, the heavier my heart felt. He noticed. Something happened, didn't it? It was like a switch flipped. Tears fell before I could stop them, soft and steady like raindrops sliding down glass. He rushed to wipe them away, listening as I choked out the story. Lucas's betrayal, my uncertainty, the fact that I had nowhere left to go. Joe hesitated, almost as if he wanted to say something, like maybe there wasn't any real proof Lucas had cheated. But when he saw how broken I looked, he swallowed the thought. "All right," he said gently. "Don't cry anymore. Stay here with me for a while." He took me to his place, warmed a towel to press against my face, and handed me a glass of milk. After that, he insisted I lie down in his bed to rest. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'm taking you to get a prenatal checkup." I blinked at him, almost dazed. "Why are you being so good to me?" For a moment, he just looked at me, something complicated flickering in his eyes. "Because," he said softly, "someone like you, an Omega like you, shouldn't ever be made to live a life that's anything less than good." The meaning of his words went over my head completely. I scowled, muttering, "Tell that to Lucas, that bastard." Joe only reached out and brushed his hand against my cheek. In a small town, things moved quickly. Even medical checkups. The prenatal report came back in no time. Everything was perfectly normal. Still, in the quiet moments, doubts crept in. How was I supposed to raise a child alone? Joe must have sensed the worry I tried to hide. He smiled, gentle but steady, and told me, "You won't be alone. I'll help you." And for a while, that promise was enough, until my next heat cycle came. It was one of those suffocating summer nights, the air thick and heavy, sticking to the skin. Sweat soaked through my clothes, and in my daze, I reached for the nearest source of warmth, Joe. Lucas, it hurts, please." A voice cut through the haze. "Evan, it's me, Joe. Not Lucas." "Joe?" I mumbled. My voice was rough, desperate. "You're an Omega, right? Please, help me. It hurts so much." Through the blur of my half-lidded eyes, I thought I saw something flicker across his face. Struggle. Maybe even pain. But when I woke the next morning, the heat was gone. Joe hadn't touched me. Instead, he'd stayed up through the night to track down a heat suppressant safe for pregnancy. When I realized what had happened, embarrassment prickled in my chest. I couldn't tell if it was from having shown him that vulnerable, desperate side of me, or because he had refused me. Either way, for days, I couldn't bring myself to meet his eyes. Normally, while staying with him, I'd stop by his dessert shop almost every day, but after that night, I locked myself away claiming I didn't feel well. Joe let it go at first, giving me space. But eventually, he came to my door. His voice was quiet, almost apologetic. "Evan, it's not that I didn't want to help you." He rubbed the back of his neck, looking away. "The truth is, technically I'm not an Omega anymore." After the divorce, he explained, he'd undergone a surgery to remove his glands. From that night on, we kept more distance. Joe set up a small bed in the living room, and the line between us, once faint, was suddenly very, very clear. Lucas Vaughn's desperate search for his wife had been trending online for days. Everyone knew Mrs. Vaughn was missing. I only found out after going back online. Apparently my face was plastered all over massive ad screens in shopping malls. It looked less like a romantic search and more like a nationwide manhunt. Good thing I'd run far. Lately, bouquets of roses kept appearing outside Joe's shop, always with a little card attached. At first, the notes were just sweet, straightforward confessions of love. But over time, the tone shifted, sliding into something uncomfortably obsessive. Things like, "I miss my wife, Evan," or even, "I want to be your loyal dog." Joe didn't like it. He installed a security camera by the door. A few days later, the flowers stopped. But a new customer appeared. A man in a cap and mask, his voice so low it sounded like he was deliberately holding it down. I couldn't help sneaking a few glances. The man's back tensed for a moment, just a flicker, before relaxing again. When I finally looked away, I could feel it, the faintest trace of eyes lingering on me. And oddly enough, beneath that heavy disguise, I thought I caught a flash of something in his expression. Something that almost looked like hurt. The routine prenatal checkup was over, and Joe and I had just stepped out of the obstetrics department. We hadn't even made it past the hospital entrance when a tall, broad figure suddenly appeared, charging toward me like a man who'd finally found water in a desert. Before I could react, Lucas Vaughn's arms were around me. He pulled me into his chest, holding me as if he was afraid I'd disappear again. Over my shoulder, his gaze was locked on Joe, sharp and guarded. Yet he still found time to sneak a glance at the ultrasound report clutched in my hand. "Evan." His voice was low, almost pleading. "Can we talk in the car? Please?" In front of Joe, his so-called rival, Lucas kept his face carefully composed. wearing the cool, untouchable mask the world knew him for. But I could see the tension in his jaw, the faint tremor in his fingers. I gave a small nod. Truthfully, I'd missed him, just a little. The moment the car doors shut, the mask shattered. Lucas leaned in immediately, like a desperate dog seeking reassurance, breathing me in, every inch of my neck, my hair, my skin, searching for any trace of another man's scent. Only when he found none did his shoulders drop in relief. Then, as if a new thought struck him, his eyes narrowed with wariness. A storm of emotions flickered there. Pride, jealousy, something dangerously close to panic, before he finally ground out, "Evan, please don't leave me." "I'm rich," he went on quickly, his tone unraveling into a raw plea. "As long as the baby in your belly is willing to call me Dad, I'll treat them like my own. Everything I have, my entire fortune, it'll all go to them. No," he corrected himself, his voice catching, "it'll all go to you. Just don't walk away from me. And as for that lover of yours who ran off with you," his eyes darkened, "can you end it with him?" I froze. Lover? What the hell was he talking about? I didn't have a lover. My silence only made him push harder. "If you really can't let him go, fine. He can stay near you, but you can't call him husband." Lucas's voice dropped to an almost broken whisper. "He'd be just something you keep around. Not a real man in your life." He swallowed hard, his composure fraying. "Please, Evan." The deeper he spoke, the softer his tone became, until it carried a faint, choked whimper. Then, with deliberate slowness, he began unbuttoning his shirt. My breath hitched. Underneath was a black compression band cinched tight across a body that was already sinfully sculpted, every line of muscle flexing as he moved. "You know," Lucas's voice was low, almost vulnerable, "you were my first." I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. In a flash, he caught my wrist and pressed my palm to his chest, hot, firm muscle beneath my fingers. His eyes burned into mine, a dangerous mix of longing and possession. Right then, Lucas Vaughn was a man with no shame, no dignity, willing to beg, bargain, and seduce in the same breath, just to keep me. And the worst part? I wasn't entirely sure I wanted to resist. The car was far too cramped, and Lucas was still mindful of my pregnancy. So in the end, we kept things brief. When it was over, he seemed almost relieved to see that I wasn't as cold toward him as before. That glimmer of hope made him push further, asking how I'd met Joe, and why I had left him without a word. Hearing him flip the story around like I was the one in the wrong made my blood boil. "Without a word?" I snapped. "Lucas, you were off having a secret rendezvous with your lover, on our wedding anniversary, no less." His face went pale. "Evan, that was a misunderstanding," he rushed to explain. "That night, he'd taken a drink meant for Miles Bennett, and the one who ended up drugged was him. I told Miles to call you. I thought he'd let you know what happened. But instead, the bastard locked me in a hotel room without telling you a thing." Lucas's tone hardened. At the time, I didn't understand why. Later, I realized he had an agenda from the start. His eyes narrowed, almost reluctant to admit what came next. "Miles had been eyeing the photo of you on my desk for a while. I just didn't want to see it then. Turns out, he'd already set his sights on you." Lucas's voice caught, like he hated himself for missing the signs. "A while back, he found you before I did. He was the one leaving roses at your shop." Lucas leaned closer, voice tight with possessive anger. "If I hadn't caught on and swapped out his cards, my wife would have been getting love notes from him." He spat the next words like venom. "He's nothing but a creep." I almost laughed, because now I understood why those roses started with sweet, romantic messages, but over time, the tone had gotten disturbingly off. Lucas and I stepped out of the car, heading toward Joe's place to pack up my things. Joe was already waiting a short distance away, leaning casually by the curb. The sight made my cheeks warm. I couldn't help thinking how long he'd been standing there, and how, well, noticeable the noise in the car earlier must have been. If Joe noticed, he didn't let it show. His face was calm, his voice even. "Have Lucas drive you. It'll be faster." Lucas, of course, didn't bother hiding the scowl he reserved for Joe. That's when I realized I hadn't even explained who Joe really was. I didn't have much to pack, half an hour, and it was done. Before we left, Joe pressed a small box of baby supplies into my hands. The weight of it was light, but in my chest it burned, because I could tell at some point Joe had imagined a future with just the two of us and the child. When it came time to say goodbye, Joe leaned in and kissed my cheek, right in front of Lucas. "You've always called me Joe," he said softly. "But my name's actually Joe." Lucas's jaw tightened, his face darkening until we stepped outside. where he immediately tossed the little box into the nearest trash can like it was contaminated. I had to explain over and over. Joe had been an Omega once, but he'd undergone gland removal surgery and no longer carried any pheromones. Lucas's expression finally eased, though he muttered under his breath, "Omega or not, he's still not allowed to get that close to you." A thought seemed to hit him, and his gaze sharpened. "You said he was an Omega. Then the baby you're carrying." I rolled my eyes. "Yours, you idiot." On the day I gave birth, Joe came rushing back from out of town. Both our parents were there too, waiting anxiously outside the delivery room. The birth went smoothly. It was a healthy alpha baby girl. When they wheeled me out, everyone crowded around, but instead of fussing over the newborn, they all seemed more concerned with me. Joe praised me openly, calling me brave, and for once, Lucas didn't shoot him a glare. A few days later, I received a bouquet of roses with no name attached. Lucas read the card, scanned the hallway, and when he didn't spot anyone, his jaw clenched. Without a word, he threw the bouquet to the ground and stomped on it twice, like crushing an enemy. Then, having rid himself of his frustration, he pulled me into his arms, clinging to me with all the sticky, possessive warmth of a man who couldn't quite let go. I let out a quiet sigh, my gaze drifting from the tiny bundle in my arms to the endless stretch of blue sky outside the hospital window. What my life would look like from here on, I didn't know. The future felt like an unopened book waiting for me to write the first words. But Joe had been right about one thing. An Omega like me, cherished by the people around me, wasn't someone the world could easily break. Maybe the road ahead wouldn't always be perfect, but with the baby in my arms and the people I loved by my side, I had a feeling it would be beautiful. And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed it. Extra, Lucas Vaughn's Diary, Entry 1. My wife ran away. There is no alpha in this world more unlucky than me. None. One night, thanks to some damn herbal concoction, my secretary locked me in a hotel room and confiscated my phone. By the time I woke up the next morning, the wife I'd worked so hard to win over was gone. Vanished. In an old, dusty warehouse on the outskirts of town, I planted my foot against Miles Bennett's shoulder. He stumbled, half kneeling on the ground, his posture bent like a man caught in the act. I kept my face cold, the air between us thick enough to crush bone. My black leather shoe pressed firmly onto his shoulder. "Why did you lock me in that room? Does Evan's disappearance have anything to do with you?" Miles looked up at me, his expression maddeningly calm. "I don't know where Evan went. As for why I locked you in, I don't feel like telling you." I didn't hold back the next kick. My foot slammed into his chest, and I shifted my weight, pressing down on his stomach. "Don't want to talk? That's fine. I'll find out eventually." Just as I turned to leave, Miles let out a low, mocking laugh. "Maybe Evan ran away because he doesn't like you." "Shut up! What do you know about whether my wife likes me or not?" Miles's words hit like a dagger. I barked back at him, but privately, yeah, I cried over it. More than once. Yes, picture a big dog with tears in its eyes. That was me. My people worked fast. Soon I had a full report on Miles Bennett's contacts, history, and every person he'd ever met since childhood. After combing through it, I found he'd only met Evan once, which meant he was innocent. So I let him go. Of course, every employee who'd been buddy-buddy with Miles, replaced, without hesitation. As for the alpha who spiked my drink at high, oh, I'll deal with him. Slowly. Piece by piece, I followed the trail until I found where Evan was living. I didn't yet understand why he'd run away, and I didn't dare act rashly. What if he bolted again? So I swapped out the card on the roses Miles had been sending him, and started going to Evan's dessert shop, pretending to be just another customer. Every day I shadowed him like a full-time stalker. Then one day, I saw it. A beta, always coming and going with Evan, sometimes even draping an arm over his shoulders or resting a hand on his waist. My pupils practically exploded. My wife had a lover. That night I went online and bought several special outfits, leather straps, silk restraints, temperature play candles, because there's no such thing as a cold Omega, only alphas who don't fight hard enough. Extra, Lucas Vaughn's Diary, Entry 2. Life has been getting more and more unbearable. That Omega named Joe, yeah, him, keeps showing up at my house under the excuse of coming to see little Roly-Poly, and the way he stares at Evan like super glue. No peeling that gaze off. Not even pretending to hide it anymore. Heh. And Miles Bennett, the pervert, is still as shameless as ever. Last time we bumped into each other at the mall, he actually had the nerve to say it was pure coincidence. Does he think I'm stupid enough to believe that? Then, right in front of me, he starts telling Evan, these days, people are more open-minded. Divorced Omegas living alone can still have a wonderful life. And Evan, nodding along like it made perfect sense. What's that supposed to mean? For the record, Evan and I got back together after that, and our married life has been smooth ever since. Thank you very much. As for little Roly-Poly, she's small but devious. Maybe it's that alpha possessiveness carved into my DNA, but whenever I take her juice, just a sip or two, she, who can't even string a sentence together yet, has somehow already mastered the art of rolling her eyes at me. Evan says it's fine. If her own father agrees, what's a tiny human's opinion worth? Yet she still cries and clings to her little daddy every chance she gets. Which leaves Evan and me with zero couple time. Ever since Evan got pregnant with our second child, his attitude toward me has been frosty. I even tried my old pathetic crying routine a few times. It used to work wonders, but now, nothing. Useless. You know what? I'm booking a vasectomy appointment, because if we end up with a third kid, I can kiss all two-person world goodbye, and maybe even lose my spot in the bed.